Ahead and call this meeting to order. First item up is our invocation pledge, and if our county administrator would lead us.
Be glad to. If we could rise for a moment of silence, and then I'll lead everyone in the Pledge of Allegiance. Let us pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
All right, next item up is presentations, recognitions, and awards, and I guess we're going to hear from one of our favorite people, Lisa Bleakley.
I believe Ms. Bleakley is here this evening to give us an update on Montgomery Regional Tourism.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, supervisors and staff. Thank you for allowing me time on your agenda to provide an update on local tourism. And for possibly the first time in the last 9 years of this program, this update will be a little brief and not quite as sweet, but I will wish to begin on a positive note. Before I forget, let's bring this up. Several from the local can you hear me? Okay, sorry. I'll stand closer. Several from the local hospitality industry have expressed immense gratitude for the support that you have provided their industry during this pandemic. From early guidance on the state restrictions to the restaurant and hotel CARES grants to tax deferments, it was evident that you understood the challenges that lie before them. They are appreciative of the actions you have taken to support them in their time of need. Your support will not soon be forgotten. This evening, I'd like to briefly walk you through 2020, beginning with just prior to the pandemic up to our current reality. In doing this, I believe a rail analogy would be helpful. In January of 2020, we were on track with seemingly no urgent signs of the train that was barreling toward us. On March the 12th, 2020, the train could be clearly heard speeding down the track with Executive Order 51, which advised the state was monitoring an outbreak of a respiratory illness called coronavirus. The first rail car came into view with the Order of Public Health Emergency 1, which was issued by the State Health Commissioner on March 19th. Bells clanged, red lights flashed, and traffic was halted when the arms fell with Executive Order 53, which restricted restaurants, recreation, entertainment, gatherings, and non-essential retail to prevent the spread of COVID-19 and to provide for public health. Executive orders to follow would ebb and flow depending on what was happening with positive cases and so forth. It affected capacity and hours of operation. These changes continue to occur. Most travel stopped as this train began to pass. Virginia Tech acted to limit attendance for in-person events or to cancel some, as did Radford University. Parent weekends, graduations, orientations, and football, which generates approximately 1/3 of travel expenditures in our region, were either canceled, held virtually, or significantly restricted in number. Weddings were postponed or canceled. Conferences, business travel was put on hold. The one remnant to prove somewhat resilient appeared to be youth and amateur sports, such as baseball and softball. And we have heard over and over that this was one of the bright spots in our area. 9 months into the pandemic, we squinted to faintly see the light at the end of this tunnel with the announcement of 2 vaccine approvals. We are now nearing the end of January and quickly approaching 1 year since the unwelcome train first brought so much destruction through loss of life and loss of livelihood. I cannot say enough good things about the New River Valley Health Department and all the organizations and individuals who have worked to test, aid the sick, and vaccinate. So before jumping squarely into your update for 2020, I want to provide some information going into the year. As you know, each fall we get an update from Virginia Tourism Corporation for the prior year. So what you're seeing are some numbers from 2019. We were looking good. We were looking strong. We were on track for record growth. We were humming right along. I always like to tout I call it the tax relief for the residents. If you look under household savings, a little math would get us to the point to where travel expenditures that visitors brought to our area in 2019, divided by the number of households in Montgomery County, would roughly equate to $285 in savings in taxes for each household in Montgomery County. Not too shabby, and we continue to grow that. As a matter of fact, the beginning of 2020 was looking great. This slide shows occupancy. You'll see the blue line from December 2019 going into quarter one of 2020. Christiansburg Aquatic Center swim, groups, business travel, university activities, and construction travel all contributed to this. Although the blue line was beginning to decrease there, you'll see it from January to February. We're still 29% in January and 19% in February percent change in growth over the occupancy of the previous year in 2018. The red line is average daily rate, and that shows what the lodging folks can get for their hotel rooms on any given day. The months of January of this particular year, the ADR was $93 in January and $104 in February. Remember, January and February, anywhere from like December until March, is a slow time for us. So that was pretty healthy. RevPAR, which I won't get into all that and what that means, but suffice it to say it's an important metric to hotels. It represents the total rooms revenue by the rooms that were sold. The biggest concern of hoteliers during this period was the number of new hotel rooms that were coming into the market pre-pandemic. Once the pandemic hit, it just magnified their situation. I just want to remind you really quickly of what we're looking like in our area for hotels. This is a recent, just kind of clip art from the internet, a quick internet search. I'm not sure what that $299 in Christiansburg is all about. But don't pay any attention to the prices right now. Just suffice it to say, there's a number of hotel rooms and it's growing. There's more that haven't been opened yet. These hotels are situated in different areas of our region. Some are located approximate to an interstate, while others are off the beaten path. And aside from hotels, which there's only hotels noted here, there are also other like bed and breakfasts, and I have a guest here with me tonight that I would like to share a couple remarks in a second, but there is lodging in our region and plenty of it and growing. In theory, if overnight visitation remains constant and more sleeping rooms are added to the market, the slice of pie for each business shrinks. This concept increased in importance to the hoteliers with the pandemic. Not only was there little new business, but there was way less of existing business. The bottom drops out in March 2020. The train can be seen now. There are no other available routes. The arms are down. The endless line of cars is a blur. Most travel has stopped. Every destination felt the impact of this reality, and business quickly realized a shift was necessary. When the metaphorical rail arms dropped, our office quickly assessed the activity schedule for the year. We brought some into the virtual environment. We rescheduled some, but none were outright canceled. We carried through with the things that we had scheduled because at the time that the pandemic came and our industry was suffering so greatly, they needed information. They needed to hear from us, and we needed to hear from them. We shifted into an information resource for local hospitality and tourism for the industry, And then while some travel was still occurring to the area, visitors would call us. They would still ask questions. Residents would call us and ask us what was open, what restrictions are in place, and what are the things that they needed to know. We also acted as a resource for the businesses in holding weekly virtual meetings in the beginning with lodging managers and communicated through email with the local hospitality and tourism industry. We partnered with the Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Blacksburg, Inc., and Downtown Christiansburg on several initiatives. 2020 has truly been all hands on deck sort of year. The next 3 slides show color graphs comparing occupancy levels of 2020, which are shown in teal, to those of the same period in 2019, shown in yellow. Although all destinations were negatively impacted by the pandemic, some fared better than others over various periods of 2020. The bright spots for our area include leisure travelers seeking small towns with wide open spaces and outdoor amenities. They also were and still are seeking areas that are relatively low in positive cases. Sports was able to organize and followed a prescribed path to safely allow the game to be played, albeit without as many spectators. But the spectators still came. Think about youth sports, and if you bring your kid into the area, even though you can't watch it, you're not going to turn around and go back home to Tennessee or wherever you came from. You're going to stay in the hotel, and that's what we heard from our hoteliers. Construction travel held and medical travel, such as that with Carillion, increased. I want to bring your attention on this graph to the area right around September. There's a dip there, September 5th through the 12th, where you saw the previous year increasing. That's a football period, right? And then another place I'd like to call your attention to is October, where you see October 3rd in the yellow, there was a dip. There was no dip in 2020. I would like to think that that had a little bit to do with some promotion that we were doing in your backyard kind of travel, but also that's where that sports kept us afloat for a while. Sadly, some businesses have fallen, but others have opened. Open doors in business means people have jobs, consumers have choices, and governments have tax generation. It is the job of a destination marketing organization such as ours to promote the community to visitors to help keep those doors open. But when travel is universally stifled to this degree, what is our role? We promote to inspire travelers to visit us when the time is right, when they are comfortable, when our community is comfortable to welcome them. We act as a conduit of information and resources. We join with other organizations to support our community. We ran tourism recovery promotion in the fall and winter with the aid of the CARES grant. The lines do not tell the whole story. While our promotions work could have positively affected the teal occupancy line, we went into it to just simply stay top of mind with travelers as they dreamed about places to visit when the time was right. Our funding model is solely based on a fraction of the transient occupancy tax from each of the towns in the county. Thank you for your contribution of the county's lodging tax. Consequently, as lodging revenues shrink, our budget follows suit. Other sources of revenue have been critical. We continue to look for additional funding and partnerships. We were fortunate to receive about $30,000 from Virginia Tourism Corporation for 3 separate grants. We've partnered with the other localities in the New River Valley on a grant, and there's be some really cool things coming out with that soon. And the CARES was just such a lifeline. Thank you for that allocation. It enabled us to do some things to, again, keep top of mind with our visitors and with would-be visitors. I want to show you a 30-second clip that I believe is very representative of the work that we did with the CARES money. It's not the only thing. I would love to talk with you later about some other things that we did, but you'll see in this video that we have a destination to offer visitors where we can provide them a safe environment. There's wide open spaces, less densely populated town centers. There's outdoor recreational opportunities, and our people act in a responsible manner. This video was created with color and energy to quickly grab the attention of an online audience. We did targeted and retargeted promotions in Facebook, Instagram, and TripAdvisor, and I will be debriefing the media recap with my board later on this month or next month. We understand that not all are ready to travel, but many are seeking inspiration for when they are ready. We want to be top of mind when they enter that booking phase. So here's just a quick 30-second clip. So, thank you. That's nice. So, what's next for us? Many, both locally and nationally, believe there will be a positive shift in the propensity of people to travel in the later half of this year. Most everything I've read, people I've talked with, what the lodging folks have on their books, it all indicates that July or later. Not that some won't happen before that, but that's really what we're hearing. It's more of a wait and see attitude as the vaccine is out there and people feel more comfortable and positive cases go down, all those things we know. Travel, like many other areas of life, have been changed, most likely forever. People are expected to seek out smaller destinations for some time to come. Things like curbside service, check-in, and definitely every business needs to have an online presence. How much has consumer behavior changed with this pandemic? How many Zoom meetings have you gone to and probably will continue to go through? People are getting accustomed to technology and familiar with it. But I said I wanted to begin or to end this as I began, on a positive note. The good news is where there's a need, there will be a business to meet that need. Area corporations, commerce areas, the universities, they all have aspirations of growth, and our hospitality industry is going to be there, need to be there to support that growth. The lodging industry specifically provides housing for travelers, employs locals, generates taxes for which pay for services, and provides for a better way of life for its residents. When the rooms are occupied, cash registers are ringing in additional businesses throughout the community. I thought it'd be helpful to hear directly from a person who's got a skin in the game here. So I've invited Ivan Beliveau. He's the owner of Beliveau Bed and Breakfast and Winery, to just share with you just a couple of remarks about what tourism means to his business and where we'd like to see it go. Maybe, Ivan, would you like to come on up and then I'll conclude with just a brief ending.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, folks, for listening to me and having me here. As I was driving in, I was thinking, so I've been here for 36 years. I arrived here in December of 1986. And what are the reasons that I came here? I came here for Virginia Tech because I was a professor there. But I came here because of the beauty and the natural area that we're in, the hiking, the canoeing, everything that's here, the wildlife, things that are just spectacular. I grew up on a 720-acre farm in northern Vermont, and I just love the mountains and all the things that provided here. So that's why I stayed. There's lots of opportunities to leave the university, but it was more important to stay here in this beautiful countryside and where we are today. So Beliveau Farm is an agritourism business. We have a winery, a brewery, a B&B, vineyards, lavender fields, open fields, sugar maple trees, and incredibly diverse forests. We offer unique natural and cultural opportunities to our guests. We have thousands of visitors every year. They come not only for wine, beer, but to visit a place to stay and enjoy the natural beauty and serenity of our place and the neighboring mountains, valleys, and cities around us. They come to visit us, and then we can direct them to other amenities of the local area, like hiking, canoeing, horseback riding, dining, lodging, antiquing, and the Virginia Tech campus. I believe that Montgomery County has a great opportunity to expand the agritourism and tourism economy beyond an economy that is largely focused on Virginia Tech. And I think this is critical for these low spots and high spots that we see throughout the year here in Montgomery County. The more we have, the more we can offer. For the past 2 years, we've had a sap to syrup season that has brought visitors to our area in a normally very quiet time of the year. In this time of COVID, people have felt safe coming to tour our venue because they feel safe with the broad open areas of our 165-acre farm. We have seen a significant growth in visitors from around the country in 2020. It's surprising the number of people from the West Coast who have traveled here. And within a 3 or 4 hour drive, we get people from Maryland, all over the Virginias, and then North and South Carolina, as well as Tennessee. The county needs more agritourism venues that include things like mountain cabins, wineries, breweries, and other unique places for adults and families. That's all I have to say. Oh, I should say, our revenue this year will be okay. We are not going to lose money. In about the 15th of March, we thought we were going to die, but we really picked up. So we will end up this season doing pretty well. Our bed and breakfast has an occupancy of 62% more than 2019. And that's because people are searching for these areas that are more remote, away from populated areas. And I think that's going to continue. So we're happy to be here. We're going to be around for a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. We are honored to represent the tourism industry here in Montgomery County and to work for the residents, the citizens of Montgomery County, to inject new money here in the economy. When this caboose passes and the rail arms lift, traffic will begin slowly moving freely again. Travel will come back, and when it does, we'll be eager to welcome those visiting our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you leave, does anyone have any questions for Lisa?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to congratulate you on your being a representative of the Southeastern Tourism Society. So congratulations. I know that is 14 states trying to promote travel and tourism, and we appreciate all you've done for the hospitality and hotel industries. I know that they've been hard hit, and we appreciate your hard work.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'd also like to make a comment. I really appreciate you bringing Ivan today because he's in my district, and it's wonderful to see. He used to be a neighbor of mine in my neighborhood, and then he left our neighborhood to go create this incredible destination called Bellevue Farm. And over the years, and I'm not sure how many years it's been, but first a few vines, next year something else, you go out there now, he's got all that he listed as far as business opportunities for revenue generation, and it's really pretty cool. And he's not done yet, I imagine. He seems to be someone that has lots of great ideas and knows how to implement them. Also, he probably has one of the largest installations of solar panels on his farm too, so that's really awesome too. So really leveraging everything that's available. Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Supervisor King, did you have anything?
No, I'm good. Thank you, neighbor.
All right, well, we thank you very much, Lisa. Your hard work and professionalism really adds a lot to our county, and we really appreciate that. We see what you do. We hope more people see what you do, but it's been a struggle this past year, and I'm sure 21 is not going to be a piece of cake either, but thank you for all you do, and thank you, Ivan, for coming and giving us a little report. That's always good to hear. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank you
night.
for your support.
Thank you, Jen. Next up is public address, and only one sign up, and that is Betty Coleman. If you'll come up, Betty, and give your name and address, you have 4 minutes.
I'm Betty Coleman, and I live at 1741 Stratford View Drive. And you're going to be glad when my 4 minutes is up, because the things that I have to say are not as fun as what the last lady said. And this may not be things that you can even address, but they're concerns that I have both for our county and for our state. And I'm hoping that you guys can come up with some way to maybe address some of these things that may be coming down the road. And I'm not a public official, so this is from a citizen that is concerned about things. And I have 3 issues, and I've written it up because I wanted to make some points, and I'll probably get very nervous as I read. But I know that you all are doing what you can, and we really appreciate what you do, and I don't want you to feel like I'm upset with you all at all. But I am upset with some things that I see, and I want to make you aware of what I'm upset about. So the first one is the election fraud. And it's amazing to me that so much fraud is so evident and still being ignored. And I want to be absolutely, completely sure that my vote counts in this county. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes for me to help to make sure that this happens. I don't want dead people, non-citizens, and people who vote more than once to be on our rolls. And I'm willing to help go through the rolls, whatever it takes. I saw an article from the Gateway Pundit, who got their information from the New York Times, and I have a website for you to look at if you care to do that. But at 5:07 in the morning after the election day, 373,642 votes were lost from Virginia. And that is just one time period. The next issue is businesses. And I'm hoping that what the previous lady said about tourism comes true, that things do pick up. But just this week, I've seen 3 businesses that are closing. And one of them is the GameStop in Blacksburg. They have a store closing sign up. And Custom Catering is closed. They were a business for 45 years, a very successful business, and they're gone. Christopher & Banks is closing in the mall, and that was also a successful business for a number of years. And not too long ago, before they started closing, I went in there to buy something, and I couldn't use the dressing room. So how are you supposed to buy clothes in a shop, a dress shop, without being able to use the dressing room? The fourth one isn't closing, but it's Lucy Monroe's, which is a small restaurant in Blacksburg, and they're having to make half of their restaurant seating into a grocery store. And they've been a successful business for several years, and they are an employer. And they're not closing, but they've had to significantly change their source of income due to these mandates. And somehow our county has to be able to do something to change these things. I don't know exactly what it's going to be. The Blacksburg Bucks were maybe a help, but that was financed by the COVID money, so that's not an ongoing thing. We don't want handouts, but we need some rule changes. Is that my 1 minute?
It is,
warning?
but I'll give you a little bit more
Okay.
to summarize and finish up.
People who are at risk don't necessarily have to go everywhere. You know, if we change our rules to let more people in, I'm in the elderly category, and so I'm not asking anything that wouldn't include me, but you don't have to go out and you don't have to go to a dress shop if you're elderly or you're sick. But, and since I'm in the elderly category, I feel like I can say that. Our state is worried about COVID deaths, and yet they're not worried about abortions. They just passed something that says our tax dollars have to pay for abortions, and that really upsets me. We've had 61.5 million abortions in this country, 13 million per year. 42% of those are for black babies. And if I were an African American, I would be really concerned about that 42%. Okay, vaccines, and this is the last one. The deaths from the vaccines are being called coincidences. And the deaths from COVID were not being called coincidences. There was everything involved in that. The flu and every comorbidity that people had were being labeled COVID deaths. Somehow we have to get this right, but I'm going to skip a lot of stuff here, but I'm concerned that these vaccines are going to be made mandatory, and I don't want one. I was a nurse for 45 years, and we had what we called informed consent. And I never, ever did anything to anybody without their consent in 45 years. And the informed consent came out of the Nuremberg trials, and that was so that we could keep unthinkable things from happening again. This informed consent is really, really important. And I hope I don't sound angry. I'm not angry with you guys at all, but I am angry with what's going on. And I feel like I'm probably a fairly representative citizen of the things that are going on. So I just wanted to bring up those things and give you some statistics of numbers that are real. And I hope that you guys will, in your times together, will evaluate these things, think about them, and consider what maybe we can do as a county, as you guys are elected officials, our sheriff is elected, and maybe there's something we can do for our county that will help some of these things.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Is there anyone else that wish to address the public address? Yes, sir. Come on up and go ahead, state your name and address, and you've got 4 minutes. Because your wife took all the rest of the time.
I wasn't planning on speaking. Wayne Coleman is my name, and I'm at 1741 Stratford View Drive in Blacksburg, Virginia. And a couple things I thought of while Betty was speaking. We're both retired, and I have spent a lot of time doing research in the last 3 years, but especially since COVID hit. And I probably do 5 to 7 hours worth of reading every day. I have an email list that's about 185 people on it that I inform, people that I've known over the years. And there are several things that have come up. Any of you familiar with Kary Mullis? Kary Mullis was a Nobel Prize winner. He was at NC State or UNC for years on the faculty. Kary Mullis is the one that invented the PCR test that's used for testing COVID-19. The PCR test, Kary Mullis said before he passed away a few years ago, the PCR test should never, ever, ever be used for testing for disease, ever. The PCR test is, the purpose of it is to amplify the number of organisms under a microscope so that you can find them. Viruses are so small that if you don't use the PCR technique, you can look, or scientists can look for a long time in that lens to try to locate the virus. So Kary Mullis came up with a technique of doubling it again. And that's what they do for the test. They double the quantity again and again and again until it's like 28 or 30 times they've doubled it. so that you can find it quickly to do your analysis. The trouble with using it as a test is if you double it one too many times, everybody tests positive. If you double it one too few times, everybody tests negative. The WHO just in the last couple of weeks has come out and said, we recognize this flaw in the PCR testing for COVID-19. So what we're going to do is research and try to come up with a better technique or a different way of using a PCR test to make it more accurate. So we know that it's not accurate. I bring all this information just to say one thing. In the state of Virginia and on other states, we've been making our decisions and using our logic based on number of cases. We should not do that, because the cases are just people that test positive. And if the test you're using to see if somebody tests positive or not is flawed, then the number of cases that you're building all the logic on is flawed. So my recommendation for whoever you talk with in the state government or the Virginia Department of Health, don't base any decisions on number of cases. Base the decisions on number of people that have symptoms. Okay? Number of people that have symptoms is completely different from number of people that test positive. The other thing that impressed me in the research I've done is that as of about 4 months ago, 40% of all the deaths, all the COVID-19 deaths, were from 5 states, and they were actually from nursing homes, most of which were in 5 states. And that was New York and Michigan, Pennsylvania, I've forgotten the other 2 states, New Jersey, and then 1 other state. So COVID-19 is big. It's some kind of biological warfare. I do not think it's a virus. There's loads of medical people and scientists that do not believe it's a virus. But it does have an effect. It can kill people. But when you consider that 40% of the deaths were from taking people that had COVID-19 and putting them in a nursing home with people that didn't.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, next up is addendum.
No addendum this evening, sir.
Yeah, we have no addendum. All right, after addendum, we have items of consent.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Madam Secretary, if you call a roll.
Ms. Blevins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Fitchikowski?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Next item up is work session. And I believe Mark is up.
Need a motion to,
Motion.
need a
Second.
motion to go in.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there a motion? All right, we got a motion. And who was
Second.
Okay.
Nobody can tell.
Okay, well, we got plenty of seconds then. All right, any discussion? Madam Secretary?
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Blevins?
Aye.
Chair Fitchikowski?
Aye.
7 ayes. Thank you.
How come it's so thick?
Thanks, Angie.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, good evening. Tonight I want to give you a update on our revenue. Before I get started, I want to give a little background information. I kind of do this every year to remind you guys how our revenue is categorized. County revenue falls into 2 categories. undesignated revenue and designated revenue. Undesignated revenues are unrestricted revenues, meaning that the board can pretty much use that revenue for just about any purpose. Designated revenues, on the other hand, are restricted revenues, meaning that they are earmarked for a specific purpose and can only be used for that purpose. And when you look at the county's revenue structure, about 89% of the county's revenue is undesignated. That's the bulk of the revenue, and that's going to be the focus of tonight's presentation. And out of that 89%, there's 3 revenue categories that drive the lion's share of the county's revenue growth on a yearly basis, and that's real estate taxes, personal property taxes, and sales and use taxes. Designated revenue, on the other hand, is about 11% of the county revenue, and it's made up of compensation board revenue, which supports our constitutional officers, and local user fees. Last year I brought this up, and I'm talking about it again because I think it's important, but back in 2008, the undesignated portion of our county revenue was about 80%, and the designated portion was 20%. And so what we have seen is each year, the undesignated portion is outpacing the designated portion, and that's mostly because the state has been pretty flat in the revenue structure. In 2008, it was at 80%. In 2009, it went to 81%. By 2013, it was at 87%, and now we're at 89%. And what's important about 2008 was the year that we had our last full-fledged recession before this one that we just have entered into. So I don't know if it's foreshadowing, but it wouldn't surprise me to see the state, as state revenues shrink, they're going to be putting even more pressure on the local governments to generate revenue. So as a result, we have been responsible for generating the additional revenue to cover things that need to be adequately funded, such as public education, public safety, and our constitutional offices. This year I want to talk a little bit about something that we haven't really talked a lot of detail about, and that's really understanding our new revenue growth. And so each year when I'm putting together the revenue projection, the first thing that I look at is our base revenue structure and look at the change in that revenue and see whether or not any of that money is going to be ongoing. So the first thing that I look at is the base revenue change. That's the ongoing difference in the current revenue, or the current year undesignated revenue, and the budget estimate. So normally I call this category base revenue growth, and that's because normally I see that we end up with a little bit more revenue than I project, because I try to be fairly conservative but realistic in our revenue numbers. The worst thing that you can do is over-project your revenue and then have expenditures dependent upon that revenue, and then you don't make the revenue, and then you have to cut the budget. So it's better to err on the side of caution and try to be a little bit conservative, but at the same time realistic, and get your numbers to come in where they should. So those revenues are what I would consider our base, our starting point. Then you have what we call new revenue growth, and that's additional revenue from new construction, the acquisition of new personal property or new business personal property, and then increases in consumption goods, such as sales tax. So when we take our base revenue number, which is the base revenue change, or that ongoing difference, plus our new revenue growth from new construction, the acquisition of new personal property, and the addition of consumption, we get our total new revenue for the year. So what are some issues facing the 22 budget? In the base budget, normally the county experiences some level of base increase that I just spoke about, and I consider that base growth. That's additional revenue over the current year estimate in some categories. What we're seeing right now is the current revenue forecast for 21 suggests that the county will make, but will not exceed, the overall undesignated revenue collection for fiscal year 21. And that number, we will, from everything that I can see at this point, it appears that we will make our revenue estimate even without the extra revenue from the real estate deferral from the 2020 B payment. So even without those revenues that were coming in, I still think we're going to make our revenue estimate. Right now, I'm like plus $200,000 on $121 million. That is close. There are several categories that will decrease in 2022, and that's going to result in an overall decrease in base funding. So essentially what I'm saying is I really don't have any base growth. I'm basically flat, and then I've got some issues that are in the base that I'm going to have to address in 2022 that's going to actually create a decrease in our base revenue structure. So in addition to no base revenue growth, the county expects to lose over $800,000 in interest earnings from fiscal year 21 into fiscal year 22. And that's mostly due to interest rate changes since last year. Just to put it in perspective, our interest earnings for fiscal year 21 are based on 1.5% or 150 basis points. The projection that I have for fiscal year 22 is 15 basis points. So yeah, this is a significant drop in interest earnings. Recordation taxes, which are tied to real estate transactions, are providing a surplus in fiscal year 21, and that's helping us make the estimate in the current year. But they're expected to return to pre-2020 levels in fiscal year 22. Some of our personal property categories are below the estimates in fiscal year 21, and motor vehicle growth is expected to be lower than in previous years. And sales tax appears to have stabilized in fiscal year 21, but is at lower collections than in fiscal year 20. And limited growth, if any, is expected in fiscal year 22. Just to kind of give you an idea of how things can change rapidly, in October, when I stood in front of the board and we talked about revenue, sales tax looked like it was going to make the estimate in the current year, and I was happy about that. By the time December rolled around, I had a $395,000 hole in my projection. So just a few months can make a big impact on what the revenue is going to look like. The other thing is sales tax is 2 months behind. So the December collection, which tends to be a large collection because of Christmas shopping, doesn't come in until February. So I really won't have a clear picture of how things are going until I get that collection, which will occur in February. All right, let's talk about our new revenue growth. Again, this is from new construction, new or additional personal property, and additional consumption goods. Historically, our new undesignated revenue growth is in the $2 to $2.2 million range per year. The projection in new revenue growth for fiscal year 22 is $1.9 million. This projection is slightly more conservative than in typical years, and that's mostly due to, one, we have a relatively consistent real estate increase that I can count on. But the unknowns right now are sales tax and the personal property book. To put it in perspective, for sales tax, our normal growth is around 2 to 3% per year. The projection I'm using is 1.3% growth over the current collection. And so like I said, I'll have a better idea when the December collection comes in, because that's going to be a big number for us. And then on the personal property book, I'm projecting $27 million going into 22. Normally, we run somewhere around $33 million. That's about what we pick up on a yearly basis. So I'm being conservative on both ends because, one, I don't know how much the stimulus money has impacted people's decisions. The other thing is a lot of the personal property book could have already been decided before COVID hit. In other words, if businesses were deciding to do things, they might not have decided to stop in the middle if they were starting that process, say, in January or February. So it's going to be hard to say what's going to happen, but I think we would be foolish to push our revenue estimates in the middle of a pandemic. All right, so let's look at our base revenue numbers. We'll start with the total undesignated revenue for the fiscal year 21 approved budget. We were at $120.1 million. You see that I have some base growth in real estate, $340,000, and then you see a whole bunch of areas where we have reduced categories, and those are in personal property, sales tax of $395,000 that we spoke about. Our interest earnings is $801,609, and then all other categories $102,000. So before we even get started into fiscal year 22, I have over $1 million in reductions in the base that is of monies that are there now that are not going to be there next year. We take our estimated new growth of 1.9 million, we add that to the total, we get a total of 121 million, or just roughly 870,000 more than we had last year. All right, so what makes up the 1.9 million in new growth? Real estate's at 1.2 million. Personal property, motor vehicle, and other personal property categories are at 600,000, and sales tax is at roughly 100,000. It gives us a total of 1.9 million. Again, we have a base loss in revenue of roughly $1 million, and that gives us a total new undesignated revenue of roughly $900,000. Let's talk a little bit about our governor's budget highlights. According to the school system, additional state funding for fiscal year 22 is estimated at a little over $1 million. The schools are also expected to lose $250,000 in recordation taxes due to state legislative changes. Essentially what happened there, there was legislation that had earmarked $40 million for recordation. $20 million went to, I believe, the Hampton Roads area, and the remaining $20 million was distributed across the state. And the legislation was changed last year that the first 20 million, that they were only going to earmark 20 million, and since the first 20 million went to Hampton Roads, there was no money left to distribute to any of the localities. So that money is going to disappear completely in fiscal year 22. For the county, at this time, no additional state funding is expected for county functions. I realize that was a lot of information to take in, but that concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, we'll just go around the room. Supervisor King, do you have any questions?
I don't have no question, but I do appreciate all your hard work on this, and I really, really appreciate you being conservative on it, because I'd rather come in later and have a little more than come in later and not have enough. I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Supervisor Shepherd?
I did have, but I think I just figured it out. So, no, I don't have any. Thank you.
Okay. Supervisor DeMotts?
I bet you were not looking forward to coming here tonight and giving us this information, were you?
Well, no, I'll be honest with you. I'm actually pleased because we could be in a way worse situation than we're in. You know, we didn't make any adjustments to our revenue. You know, we pulled some money aside in anticipation, but we didn't adjust any of our revenue estimates because we just didn't know. And in fact, at one point, you know, there was some information that was coming out where people were saying, you know, hey, you know, they had created projections on what they thought counties would lose, and then they sent it out to everybody. And you know, their numbers came in like that we were going to be losing millions and millions of dollars, and that was just not the case at all. So I think sometimes people jump the gun a little bit, and they see the pandemic and they respond immediately, and sometimes it's better to be kind of cool-headed and watch how things occur and then make adjustments as you have more information.
And I really appreciate that. I was looking forward to this presentation tonight, just to kind of get a little bit of stress and worry off of my back. And it actually has. Of course, I would love to see much larger numbers than what you've shown us tonight, but I also trust in the research that you've put behind your numbers. And so I know that the information that you've given us is information that can be deemed fairly accurate. I'll look forward to hearing what happens when you get the December sales tax in. I think that'll be a very interesting number for all of us to hear, so we can kind of understand how that'll affect the whole picture. Thank you very much for what you're doing, for what you guys have always done. We are very blessed to have you. Thank you for being here.
Okay. Supervisor Blevins?
Mark, thank you for the presentation, and I'm glad that we are a county that is very conservative, and that's put us in a good position where we're not shortfalling of millions and millions of dollars. Several things. I know we're waiting on, you said, for the December sales tax, also the personal property tax. Do we know if we were anybody behind and late on that, or did most of our citizens and businesses be able to make their deadlines for that?
Yeah, so far everything looks normal. So I haven't seen any issues as far as our collection numbers. I look at the collections throughout the year, but really the first big attempt to see everything is in December. So like when I talked to you guys in October, I had never done that before because I don't really have enough information at that point to really give you any idea of how things are going. Our December collections are consistent with prior years. So there's nothing out there that has me worried. The things that worry me, though, are the unknowns, that I don't know how much of the sales tax is related to the stimulus, in other words, the injection of money into the system, and whether or not that's propping us up a little bit. So those things, I'm not going to know the answer till later. But I think, when we're trying to look at where we're projecting, I think it's unrealistic to overshoot it, but at the same time, you can't be too conservative either. And I think that I'm trying to be a little conservative, but at the same time realistic in the sense that I'm fairly confident. Really our big issue here going into 22 is the interest earnings. I mean, if you look, I have $1 million hole, but $800,000 of that $1 million hole is because of interest rate changes. And we expected that. In fact, at one point I thought we weren't going to be able to hold our interest rate for the 21 budget, and we were fortunate to be able to do that. But I knew before we even got started, interest rates were at 0 to 25 basis points. That's the Fed funds rate right now. Banks were going to come in somewhere between 0 and 25 basis points. And, so 15 isn't out of the realm. I was hoping for a little better, but, 15 basis points isn't out of the realm for, what the interest rate environment is.
But that's a big drop from the 150 that was
Yeah.
prior.
I mean, that's a huge, that's basically a penny on the tax rate.
Right, okay. And the other thing, on the, for Montgomery County Schools, they're looking at over $1 million state funding in addition. Is that, what is that from?
I don't have the details on, they get a calculation tool based on the governor's budget, and so they put their ADM numbers in there. I'm not privy to what they're utilizing to drive those numbers.
Okay.
But the number that I got from the schools was slightly over $1 million. And then, of course, they're not going to receive that $250,000 in recordation that was in their base.
Right, okay. And then no additional state funding. Let's hope and pray they don't give us any state mandates that we have to.
Yeah, that's always an issue.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mark.
Supervisor Bone.
So what do you think would be the worst case for what you call the propping up of the stimulus checks?
I'm not sure I know.
You've taken a fiscally responsible guess, educated guess for the impact that they are making, but you're also, I'm sure you've got a range, gosh forbid, on the positive side, it might be this, but on the negative side, it might be this. What's your sense of on the low side, what that would be?
Well, I think in a certain sense, I'm trying to put us where I think we're going to be. Mm-hmm. And so, right now I'm in negative territory when it comes to sales tax because I'm trailing the estimate in the current year, and I'm trailing the prior year number. So I'm looking at maybe 1.2 to 1.7% in the hole. So even taking the current year number and putting 1.3% on top of it, it doesn't give me a lot of extra money. Going into the next year. I think that, under normal circumstances, you could expect, 2 to 3% growth in sales tax. But the concern is you don't know how people are spending their money. And everybody, that was in that income bracket received X number of dollars. And there were 2 stimulus checks that came through on that. So, it depends on how people spent that money. In other words, if people spent their money based on the fact that they had extra money to spend, then we could see that the sales tax numbers are slightly higher than they would have been had they not received the money. And so, and then the next question is how quickly does the economy recover, and whether or not people are going to feel like, hey, it's okay to spend again. You know, if you look at our revenue structure, things look pretty good compared to where they could have been at this point.
Do you take the unemployment rate into consideration? And if you do, how do you do that?
Yeah, I'm looking at the unemployment rate, but at the same time, it's hard to draw a direct correlation between what the unemployment rate is and what sales tax numbers are. In particular, as far as consumable goods, because for a certain portion of that money, people are going to buy things anyway. They have to buy certain things. And so even with the unemployment rate, it makes it even harder because, one, you have the unemployment rate, but then you've got all the stimulus money thrown on top of it. So that kind of muddies the water because we haven't had that situation before. You had asked me at the last meeting about, you know, inflationary pressures and how that affects things. Well, we're in completely different territory now because we've injected a ridiculous amount of cash into the system. And so how that money gets into the money supply is what's going to dictate how things are going to roll forward. And I don't know the answer to that.
Do you have a sense of how much money came into Montgomery County in the form of stimulus checks?
I have no idea.
And I just want to be clear, the December Blacksburg bucks or whatever that was called would not have any effect because this is county and that was that Blacksburg specific, right?
Yeah, any money that is spent in Montgomery County goes to the state and then comes back to us as a 1%.
Oh, okay.
So there would be some impact, but I couldn't tell you what that would be.
And then lastly, on slide 7, I just want to make sure the second bullet, is the word undesignated supposed to be in that second bullet or not?
Yes, that the second bullet is referring to the undesignated
Okay, thank you.
revenue. Yes.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Vice Chair Biggs.
I want to agree with Supervisor DeMotz. I'm interested in what happens with the December sales tax, but also to thank you for your thorough presentation, as always. And I like you being on the conservative side, and then we can always hope that things go up. Thank you.
I think most of the questions I had have been answered, but just to follow up on stimulus, have you heard of anything other than cash directly to citizens? Have you heard of any other plans that might affect the counties?
Yeah, so the last stimulus check in December wasn't tied to any monies going to local governments. So that was voted on separately, and local governments were left out of that equation.
Right.
The current proposal that Biden has put forth, I believe, is 1.9 trillion, and part of that has some ties to local government. In other words, the stimulus money is going to be earmarked similar to what happened with the CARES Act money. At this point, you know, things are very early. They're going to, from the stuff that I've read thus far, it looks like decisions, they may break it up because I think there is some level of support for more direct cash payments. And there is less support for some of the other things that are tied to that $1.9 trillion package. So if it gets broken up, there's a good chance that you might see some of that stimulus money occurring in February. If it stays together, I think it could be a little bit difficult to say when things are going to happen, because I think there would be more strife because there's concerns about the amount of money and how that money is going to be distributed. But as of right now, that 1.9 trillion does have some money that is supposed to be earmarked for state and local governments.
Okay. All right. Well, yes, thank you as usual. Were there any follow-up questions? I don't see anybody. All right. Well, we thank you, Mark. Make sure you shine that crystal ball up real good for the end of the year report for sure. All right, next up on the agenda is going to be our reports.
Motion to go out of.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. And that's what a vice chair needs to do.
And I so move.
Second.
Second, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion? Madam Secretary?
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Blevins?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Chair Fitchukowski?
Aye.
7 ayes.
All right, first report, county attorney.
No report, Mr. Chair.
I didn't even know
Okay,
he
well,
was
I mean,
over
you had a big
Ooh,
meeting last time, so I understand that. Our county administrator.
Thank you. Just a couple of items this evening, as I always say. First off, I appreciate Mark being here tonight and working with Angie and our staff on the budget. I can tell you the phrase that I'm using with staff as we move into the budget season is hold the line. It's a very challenging budget this year. There's still a lot of unknowns out there. We're very hopeful. You heard a lot of things in Lisa Bleakley's report about hopefully in the next 6 months or so, we're going to start seeing some better news. But until we start seeing that better news, we're going to be very conservative with the budget. So I'm just giving you a sneak peek of what I think is going to be coming in a couple of weeks. I did want to share with you, I sent this in an email, but I would like to share it with folks publicly as well, that we have seen that our vaccines have been a challenge in terms of getting distribution of numbers of doses out into the community. This week, we're focusing on getting vaccines for folks that are 75 and over, along with administering second doses for those who received their first shot at the beginning of the month. We had to cancel over 1,200 appointments this week due to the fact that we're not able to get the vaccine as we had hoped. The task force working with the business continuity group has set up vaccination clinic to be able to process between 1,000 and 1,500 a day. So we're ready when that moves forward. We look forward to hopefully getting that soon. It is our understanding that those that have received a first shot will be contacted to be notified when the second shot is due. That being said, everyone who got a first shot, even if you didn't have a second date on the card that you received, there is a first date. If you haven't heard anything around 4 weeks after you've gotten the date from the first time you received the vaccine, you should give a call or let us know, and we'll try to start chasing that down as well. There's been a tremendous number of calls and emails. It's something that's of great importance to a whole lot of people. A lot of folks have been very frustrated with the process. Angie and I have been in several meetings over the last couple of weeks. There is a lot of frustration over the process at all levels. We're all doing the best we can, and we just need everybody to be patient and understand. Please be vigilant about it as well, but calling and leaving a nasty voicemail or sending emails to people that aren't polite doesn't get us vaccines any faster. So would appreciate help with that. A couple of other things I wanted to mention. I do look forward to seeing everybody on Saturday to go over some things during our extended work session. We've got a lot of topics to cover. I talked to Kevin Bird this afternoon. Kevin's going to be our facilitator. Kevin's very excited about working with us to work through various topics. We have collected those. We'll get that back out this week, and if there's anything else you can think of you want to make sure we cover while we're there on Saturday, please bring it up, because that's our opportunity to talk about various issues as we move forward. And the last thing I wanted to say is I very much appreciate all the prayers and kind words and thoughts over the last couple of weeks. January's been a very difficult month, and I just appreciate all your support. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we'll go around for the board reports, and we'll start with Supervisor King.
Y'all must feel bad because you put me down here. I've been called on first several times. I don't have no report, but I do want to tell the Health Task Force how much I appreciate everything they do and everybody that's involved in it. And I know it gets frustrating when you're trying to get your appointment to get a vaccine, and you try to call stuff, but people are working hard as they can. They are. They're out here on the front line trying to get everybody a vaccination, and they do appreciate your patience, and it will come around. It just takes time. Now, I do want to tell the finance department how much I appreciate their hard work on the budget, and I know we want to tell the spouse of all the employees in the finance department, we're getting ready to start the budget, and we do appreciate you letting them come in and work many hours to get this board straight with our budget. And hopefully we'll get through this one with ease, but we just have to understand we need to be conservative with the money that we have because we don't know what this year's bringing. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor DeMotts.
Two things, and I cannot remember whether or not I have told this board how very much the Parks and Rec Commission appreciates the investments that we have made into Parks and Rec. So I want to make sure to, if I haven't told you, tell you. If I have told you, double down, because they are very, very appreciative of the investments that we have made in Parks and Rec expansion. And then also, I did want to give a huge shout out, and I feel like probably all of us are in the same boat. I received my first vaccine on a day where there were a lot of people receiving a vaccine, and it was truly incredible how extremely well organized it was, how many of our volunteers I saw volunteering their time on a business day to be there to make sure that people were coming in the line easily, how many of our sworn law enforcement officers were there. It was just truly incredible, the community effort of the men and women that are working in this community to keep everybody safe. It was touching. It was also, the line was very long. I think I waited maybe 45 minutes. I know that was atypical. It was due to a surge that day. And so that is not the normal expectation, but the spirit of the line was really, people were excited. And then also the volunteers were consistently coming out and down, up and down the line, pulling people out of the line if they had mobility challenges or needed to get in a little bit quicker. I saw just a lot of love for the community reflected in the work that was being done by employees and volunteers. So keep up the great work. It was really remarkable to see. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing.
Thank you. Supervisor Shepherd.
Hadn't thought about it until Mr. Mott said something. I also got a vaccine on a very busy day, and the line was all the way around behind the building. I think it took me just about an hour from that point to get my shot. And there were a lot of volunteers there, a lot of rescue people and people that don't get paid to be there. So, and I really appreciate it, and I know the entire community does. And I want to say thank you to the finance department too. I know I was a little bit short when Mark was up there, but I kind of have to think about things before I can process them. So anyway, that's all.
Thank you. Supervisor Blevins.
Just to echo Supervisor DeMotts and Supervisor Shepherd, how appreciative we are for the New River Health District and all the volunteers and on the task force for serving. And I know the frustration with our citizens, the demand just simply outweighs the supply at this time, and they're doing the best they can. And it's great to hear about all the volunteers and the love that's shown in this county. And we do appreciate our volunteers. With that being said, I also wanted to show my appreciation or share my appreciation with our first responders, again, rescue, volunteer rescue and fire departments. With bad weather coming this week, again, they are ready to serve, whether it's 2 a.m. in the morning, and we are so blessed in this county to have so many dedicated men and women that volunteer their services for our fire and rescue squad, so I wanted to shout out to them. And one more shout out to, first of all, I want to thank all of our military and military families, but a special shout out to our National Guard members from Montgomery County with the 116th Infantry Brigade Combat Team as they serve and stand guard at our U.S. Capitol. And so our prayers and I'm just proud of their service in representing our county. That's all.
Thank you. Supervisor Bone.
I loved the tourism report. It's so nice to not see that the rails are falling off too badly, carrying on the theme of her, anyway. As well as Mark's report, I think that we have so much confidence in the finance department and the analysis that that too, it doesn't look like we're falling off the rails, which is relieving. We're not out of the woods. It'll be quite a while before we're out of the woods, but at least we're hanging tight. Somewhere along the line, I heard, probably one of your emails, Craig, that the New River Health District was or had provided perhaps a third of the vaccinations for the whole state, or something pretty substantial. And I love hearing statistics like that because our little old county in Southwest Virginia is a lot better at this stuff than the rest of the state, if you really kind of think about the numbers. So it's just really incredible. Now, I completely understand that people are frustrated with the situation, given what we have to deal with. You know, not enough vaccines, perhaps the state, let alone the nation, not coordinating as well proactively as we would have liked, and so on. But I couldn't say enough about our health district and the people that support what the health district is trying to do for our citizens. It's just incredible. I do want to also say that I got my first vaccine on the 12th, and I had no line. I walked right through, sat down. I mean, of course, I stopped where I was supposed to stop, and sat down, got my vaccination, didn't feel a thing, went for 15 minutes to wait, and I was out of there within 20 minutes. It was incredible. And I just want everybody to know, whoever wants a vaccine will eventually get one. It's just going to take some time, but we're trying our best and we'll continue to try our best. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Biggs.
A few things. I wanted to thank Craig for that update, and I wanted to let folks know that I've gotten a lot of happy calls today because people were called from the health department and they were told when they were coming in. And the calls I got before that, I basically listened because, as you said, Sarah, people were so frustrated. And so the key to all of this is patience. And folks out there might be wondering, well, why the Board of Supervisors get their shots? You know, because we've been talking about, and I got mine on the 15th. And the reason being that we fell under the classification of essential county employees, and you can argue that one way or the other, but I'm very appreciative of the chance to have gotten my vaccine, and I would encourage anyone that has a chance to get it. You might want to, clear it with your doctor, whatever, but it's really important that we do this to get this situation under control. And I'm really, really hoping at the federal and state level that something can be done so that more vaccines are coming in. Because it was really sad news to see that we had to cancel 1,200 appointments. That was really, really sad news. Also, I want to remind everyone that Thursday is the VACO Lobby Day, which is virtual, but anything that you want brought up that, to our General Assembly people, we know their numbers. We know how to get a hold of them, but you just have to sort of follow what's been happening. I want to give a shout out to Jen because she has helped me immensely in trying to get ready for a presentation on Friday, and it's entitled Citizen Engagement During COVID. And another supervisor, Ms. Ruth Larson from James City County, will be with me on that, and I think Sherry's going to be there. So, but anyway, it's all virtual. But I can tell you that Ms. Larson has been very, very frustrated because her health department is only on 1A. They're not to 1B yet. So what does that say about us? We have a fantastic organization. The logistics, we're ready. We just need the vaccines to plug into the logistics. We're ready to roll. I also wanted to tell you all that I don't often talk about this, but on the Workforce Development Area Consortium Board, we have a lot of work to do because we have to certify 7 centers, and we also have to do the strategic plan. So all of that's ongoing, and I'll let you know if any of the centers don't pass. Hopefully they will. And the airport and the Community Services Board meetings, they went great. Everything's going well there. So that's a big plus. And I think that's all.
All right. Yeah, I want to start out with, thanking Finance for all their work. I was just kind of reminiscing about this time last year. We got a glowing, almost made us all giddy report, only to have the year just keep dropping and dropping. But it's nice to know that we have a group of folks that are looking out for our money so that we are prepared to take whatever action we need to do. And it's always good to hear from Lisa Bleakley. She works very hard. I mentioned that earlier. Usually her reports indicate how much money has brought into our county. And again, that normally is a huge glowing report. But I think all the things that she's doing is helping us to maintain. And with folks like Ivan making the best of a bad situation, that's all we can hope for. And I don't mean to beat the COVID thing either, but I don't know if we can really talk enough about it. Our task force that we have is just so far out ahead of everybody else in the state. It's just unbelievable. It would be nice if these areas of the state that are getting these large numbers of vaccine and can't distribute it, if they would send it here, at least we can do whatever we can do, which we can do quite a bit more than what they're asking. It would be nice if they could set that up, but then I think, well, that means the state would have to figure that out, and by the time they did, everybody would have been vaccinated anyway. So, and it's a shame because as probably like all of you, you've gotten complaints from citizens saying the county needs to do something about this, but as we all know, this is the state health department, and that's where the vaccine is coming from. So it's one of those things that they are doing all they can do, and it's out of their hands. So they are prepared and ready to really get into this thing. I also want to thank all the volunteers. Being in the regional commission, I get to hear a lot of what the regional commission does to help the task force, and they have gone above and beyond and have improved our situation here in the New River Valley, which includes Montgomery County, greatly. And they rely heavily on volunteers. Their bank of folks that answer the phone and set up the appointments are volunteers. So if anybody out there has some time and would like to help out, I'm sure they could use your assistance. But if it wasn't for volunteers in this county, we might be like the rest of the state. So we definitely appreciate all of them. And that's about all I've got. So with that said, we are dismissed.